Our second conversation for today is going to be a fireside chat moderated by Raja Al-Mazrouei, Executive Vice President of the DIFC Fintech Hive. And we will be joined by Navin Gupta, Managing Director of Ripple in Middle East and South Asia. Ripple just have also recently opened their regional headquarters here in the DIFC, so warm welcome to our new family. Thank you so much, Navin, for joining us all the way from Mumbai.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with all of you here today. And I'm pleased to introduce Navin. Navin has an extensive experience in global transaction banking, payments and cash management, and strategy planning, following nearly 2 decades working for HSBC and Citigroup across the US, Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, and India. Navin served as a board member of National Payments Corporation of India from 2011 to 2014. In 2008, he was recognized as one of the 50 most promising young leaders in Asia Pac by the Asian Banker. Navin is an MBA graduate from Thunderbird School of Global Management in Arizona, and he currently lives in Mumbai and is an art of living teacher. Thank you for joining us, Navin.
Pleasure.
Navin, before we start, would you please tell us what's Ripple's technology specifically, and what's the impact of the increasing adoption of blockchain?
Absolutely. So Ripple as a company was fundamentally born to move money around the world the way information moves today. So like Raja can send email to Navin, and she doesn't need to worry about that I'm sitting next to we are sitting next to each other, or you are in UAE, I'm in India, or I'm in the US. You press the button, and the email reaches me, irrespective of the distance between, the physical distance between us. But that's not true about money today. So if you were to send money between us here in UAE, maybe we can exchange cash, but if you were sending to India, you were sending to US, probably it'll take 3 days. And Ripple's fundamentally here to change that legal money between 2 individuals or businesses should be able to move exactly the same way. So, and we have a blockchain platform which is meant for enterprise. So which means regulated financial institutions, they could be banks, they could be MTOs, who on the behalf of their customers are doing this regulated business to send money around the world, should be able to use the Ripple plumbing. And the way we think about it would be just in terms of 3 sort of parts. So one part is clearly the technology, and it works. But the second thing, that's where we are, is building the ecosystem. And that's the reason we are here in Dubai, because we are getting more and more participants to join in, because an email is only relevant if all your 300 friends have an email, and then you're able to send to each other, and then the 301st who joins is able to get the benefit of this ecosystem of 300 friends who are already there using that. And then the third part we'll talk about a little bit is interoperability, for which we have been doing quite a bit of work as well.
Thank you, Navin. As we all know about, the central banks of Saudi Arabia and the UAE have concluded the digital currency pilot, the CBDC, finding that distributed ledger technology can improve the cross-border transactions and meet the demands of financial privacy in a purely digital context. How do you see these efforts in paving the way forward towards digitization of currencies?
True. So I think I'll just give a step back for our audience to understand what CBDC is, because sometimes otherwise we use heavy words, and just simplifying them is much easier, right? So each one of you would have a dirham in your pocket, right? And it would have a number on it. So it'll say A43231, and it's a physical note. Think of it as just a photograph of that note on your phone in an electronic format, but it still has a number. So today, otherwise, your digital transaction, the money that you have in the bank, is not linked to a number. It doesn't have an identity to it. But in this case, it will have an identity. And hence, when you transact, say it moves from Salman to Raja, that particular number or that particular token is moving from him to her, right? So that's what CBDC, in terms of fundamentally it is. It's electronifying the physical cash or cash that doesn't have identity, but it'll have identity going forward, right? So I think the first thing that helps with CBDC is it's creating awareness, education among central banks around the world to say, hey, digital money is real, right? And it could be privately issued digital money, it could be government issued digital money, or tokenization is here to stay. So everybody's saying, okay, there is already Bitcoin, there is already Ethereum, there is already XRP, which is open ledger distributed systems. Could there be central bank issued digital money as well? And does it make sense? if it makes sense, in what form it makes sense, right? So earlier, where you would find maybe 5 years ago, there was some reservation around it to say, hey, is this for real? What is happening? But now there is a lot more openness to say this is the future, and we really need to study it to say, me as a country, me as a central bank, how do I play in this ecosystem, right? The second thing that I would say is, a lot of time we assume it as a zero-sum game, but it is not. Right, let's take an example. We use UAE, we use dirhams in the UAE, we use US dollars in the US, we use Singapore dollars in Singapore. And in a lot of times, these currencies complement each other, depending upon what is the usage and what is that country selling in that particular currency, because still majority of the transactions are domestic transactions, so you really don't need a foreign, a non-national currency to be relevant. But the moment you cross borders, right, so then you need a bridge asset to be able to either convert into a currency of that particular country or to be able to buy something from it, right? And it's the bridging part where we, for example, as Ripple, play a big role. So a lot of these domestic economies will get digitized, like China is almost fully digitized or is experimenting with CBDC, but you would still need a bridge whenever you do a crossover from one CBDC into another CBDC. And that's where interoperability comes in. That's where a bridge assets comes in, which in a physical world, a US dollar plays a big role, for example, right? And I think the last thing that I would say is that still it is in early stages of its formation, right? Everybody's thinking, is it useful for people around in the room? How will it change their lives? What benefit will it create? What is the use case? What is the business value? And also, like, how do you do it in a safe, secure format, right? So I think there is a lot more work to be done. But what I can safely say is it's creating a lot of education, it's creating a lot of openness, and it is creating an opportunity to ask the right questions to say, can this help me to transform my economy into something that is not there today, right? So I think, and that's the right discussion to have.
Absolutely, and I believe it also brings a major challenge of fiscal policy regulation on top of that, which is going to look at all of these elements. So it will take us a little bit of time, but eventually I think that's where we would be going. So Navin, what do you think of the cross-border payments opportunities and challenges specifically for the Middle East region?
So for me, and I'll be very upfront with you, I'm actually hugely surprised that we don't have a global remittance company here in the Middle East. I think there should have been 10 of that, right? So think about what is Middle East known for. So what is Middle East is known for is, hey, you know what? We have this large talent pool. Say 90% of the people here in the Middle East are foreigners who come from all over the world, and they send money overseas. So if you look at how Facebook was born in the US, how Google was born in the US, is they said, hey, you know what? We have a captive market of American citizens who essentially are the first adopters on the Facebook platform. They hone on the American market, which is a large market in itself, domestic market, and then they take their products overseas and conquer the world, right? We have this very natural opportunity, at least in terms of cross-border payments, here in the Middle East, where we have the largest money sending region in the world, right? I mean, it sends over 100 billion US dollars to every single receiving economy in the world. It imports almost all the goods that we essentially consume today, and the money moves in the opposite direction. But surprisingly, we don't have global brands, global companies who leverage this transfer of money overseas. I mean, and I'm just being very open, right? So if you look at TransferWise, if you look at eBay, my colleague here, so lots of these companies were born outside and then they came into the Middle East. But what I would love to see is somebody taking advantage of this unique market that already exists, the consumer demand already exists, and build a global brand, build a global company. Then they take overseas, right? To say, hey, you know what, this company originated in the Middle East and now it is able to conquer the world because the natural market is already there, right? And that's the reason for us, this market is so attractive, right? Mm-hmm. Because as we're building the plumbing in this region for these businesses to then go to the next level is what our expectation is. Our expectation is not that we are here to, yes, kind of bring only the US-based business model here, but how to change the fundamental plumbing and let entrepreneurs then build the next TransferWise, the next eBay, or a number of other global brands around the world, Remitly and others, and then say, hey, you know what, they were born out of the Middle East and they, of course, use the plumbing that we are putting together to make cross-border payment easy. So the problem that we are solving for is three. First is on the customer experience, right? So on the customer experience, we're solving for speed, we are solving for error rates, and we are solving for transparency in terms of the pricing, right? And this number of institutions, both in the Middle East and in the receiving markets around the world, are already using. The second thing that we are solving for is liquidity, right? So as you know, it costs on an average 7% if Raja was to send money to Navin and we were in different countries, right? So imagine you're an SME and all of you here represent companies in the world. If 7% of your principal was to be taken away, if anybody knows what's the gross margin for Toyota, what's the gross margin for Volkswagen, and these guys make hundreds of millions of cars, and you would find the gross margin is sub 10%. And let's assume a big company was just transferring money or bringing money back home, and 7% of that principal was taken away. Or let's look at on the opportunity side, part of that principal could be added back to the bottom line because now you don't have the friction what you used to have earlier. So for us, it's very fundamental that we are able to solve that problem through solving the problem of liquidity. Because, you may know that if you look at banks' working capital, today for a bank to make a cross-border transaction possible, they keep a very large amount of nostro account balances in the beneficiary country. And this is in the tune of about $10 trillion. And this $10 trillion has capital cost. This $10 trillion is the depreciation risk with the treasury of the banks or the PSP that manage it. But that is again gets passed on to the customer, which accounts for the large portion of the 7%. And now with digital assets being present, what we are able to do is instead of having those balances 24/7, 365 days a year, we are able to convert that 100 GBP into XRP. That XRP travels to Philippines and within few seconds gets converted into Philippine peso and gets the payout happens. That means hundreds of millions of dollars of trapped capital that earlier used to be in Philippines now doesn't need to be there anymore. And that directly has an impact on the 7% and it starts to go down. So for us, we are constantly thinking to say, hey, how do we make a business more efficient? How do we enable our partners around the world to, at a significant level and not at an incremental level, lower the cost of friction, the customer experience that they are facing today? And that's what we are doing on an everyday basis and earning the trust of our customers by doing so.
Amazing work. Navin, if we look at the trends specific to this industry, how will the new payment methods like digital assets improve the scenario?
Yeah. So what I would say is digital assets for the first time give us the ability of 24/7 markets in the originating country and in the destination country. So let me give you an example, right? And I know that the trading, the ADGM approved license exchanges have not started in UAE, but let's assume they start very soon. Then every day you will have, say, $1 billion worth, and we can use it at $3.7 billion in AED, that will get transacted. So let's assume people are buying Bitcoin, people are buying Ethereum, people are buying XRP. And that's just natural liquidity that is there in the system, and 24/7, 365 days a year, people are doing buying and selling. And that creates an order book, or that creates an opportunity. And these people are there are people who are sending money back to Philippines, the number of Filipinos, for example, who work in the UAE. And exactly the same thing is happening at a government-approved exchanges in Philippines 24/7, 365 days a year. But just for simplicity's sake, let's assume it's again $1 billion, right, of exchange that's happening. Then you have an opportunity to match these two order books together. And with almost nil friction, you're able to take a AED and do a payout in Philippines peso, right? And that's the plumbing that we are building, and digital assets enables that without compromising on AML, without compromising on KYC, without compromising on any security standards around the world. You're able to take advantage of 24/7 market in AED to XRP, hypothetically, for example, and XRP to Philippines peso. So what you're doing is you're looking at a new innovation that has come in the market, but you're able to solve a time-old problem of remittances, the 7% of the friction that exists, and able to lower it dramatically. And the same thing you can do between UAE and Kuwait, for example, UAE and Oman. And a lot of time, otherwise, digital assets are misunderstood, right? So if you look at the newspaper, a lot of time they're seen as, hey, you know what is this funny thing that's going on? Or it has got a lot of negative press about it. And I think I would say that this is like the early days of internet. So if you look at internet 1995, 1996, most of us would know internet from Napster, right? Illegal file sharing or illegal music downloads. And those were early parts of internet when a lot of wrong things happened, right? But the fundamental technology then allowed us to come up with emails, Facebook, WhatsApp, things that have transformed our lives in a very different way. So the same thing. So I think we are past the, you can call it the speculative part or the not so good part of the digital asset. And now you are seeing mature companies like us and a lot of other peers around the world who are saying, how can I fundamentally transform Raja's experience, ABC Inc.'s experience on the friction that they're facing by using a digital asset like in the example that I gave. And I think we are moving to that shift, and that's the reason you saw the announcement, for example, for PayPal, which now is allowing all its merchants and users to buy and sell cryptocurrency. Similarly, Square has been doing it for a number of years. Now you're seeing large ecosystems participating and bringing digital assets to mainstream.
Thank you, Navin. And we see the future of finance actually being transformed, or finance industry in general being transformed towards futuristic. And we see that Dubai, back in 2016, launched the Global Blockchain Council with the aim of highlighting the implications of the innovation in the blockchain, specifically on the future of business and finance sector, and its role and the role it would play in facilitating the transactions with the various sectors of financial and non-financial sectors as well, to increase the efficiency and reliability levels. How does the DIFC Dubai and the UAE in general align with the overall strategy of Ripple, as we see you already established in the DIFC, considering the ecosystem that's in place?
True, absolutely. So I think the way to think about the world is there are money centers in the world. So for example, New York is a money center, London's a money center, Dubai is a money center, Singapore is a money center, right? And the role of these money centers is to bring the legal system, the accounting system, the investors, borrowers, everybody together, say, let's assume in the same room, and provide a safe place for them to be able to transact with each other. So think of them as money markets, right? So where all of us in the room are safely able to transact with each other. And there, Dubai has a huge advantage because being a place where and DIFC has a significant advantage where it is able to pull these expertise together and bring them in the same room and then say, hey, you know what? Instead of us individually trying to meet because we are in a common place, let's create something special, let's create a solution, let's create a transformative idea for either the borrowers of money or lenders of money to be able to transact with each other, right? So that way DIFC has its natural advantage, Dubai has its natural advantage to be able to do that. But the second thing that I would say is that we need to convert that natural advantage into solutions that people can use, right? So because let's assume now Singapore has a crypto regulation which is very advanced, which was very talked about because we are being streamlined on Singapore Fintech Festival. So as some money centers take lead in operationalizing the usage of new money, digital assets in this specific case, it is very important for other money centers to quickly either complement them, supplement them, or even compete, I would say, right? And I think that's where both the opportunity and the challenge lies to say, how do we make sure, because money in the world is mobile, right? So investors around the world will move places where they will find the most liquidity in those particular markets to be able to do that. So for example, Dubai has advantage in terms of gold trading, has advantage with DMCC being there, commodities being traded on a regular basis, and how do we convert the intent into a lot of actions on the ground? And I think if there was one place which can happen a lot more quickly is Dubai, is DIFC, because the natural ecosystem exists. Already the fundamental rules, transparency, good legal system is there, and Dubai has the ability to move very fast to be able to operationalize this. So I'm hugely positive. That's the reason Ripple is here, to work with DFSA, to work with regulators, to work with players in the ecosystem, may it be banks, may it be digital asset exchanges, to be able to bring that operational capability on the ground and deliver the solutions to customers who are seeking it.
Thank you, Navin. We're also very excited to have Ripple here in the DIFC. The DIFC has built an ecosystem for the future of finance, a vision that is core to everything we do here at the DIFC. And with more than 230 fintech companies based in the DIFC, we're sure on the path to be the largest fintech hub in the region. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope that these industry insights are useful to you, and we wish you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you, Navin.
Thank you, Navin and Reja. Any questions from the... Oh, wow, many questions. Okay, Navin, you're a popular one.
I'm in trouble. Please. Yeah, we can pass there.
Yes, I apologize to the audience. It's more like 3 questions rather than 1. The first one is I was looking at the Ripple price while you were talking, and it seems in October you experienced a bump. I would like to know what happened there and what you think the price will be within the next year and why. The second question is with regard to your specific technology. Why Ripple and not Hyperledger Fabric, for example? And the third one is with regard to money remittances. You mentioned the market is interesting in Dubai. Which specific method would you use to quantify that market in Dubai? And the reason I'm asking this question is I am in touch with a company that does that. And the way they did it for emerging markets was to monitor telecommunications.
True. Yes, so the first question is, answer to your first question. So Ripple is a tech company, right? And what you're talking about is XRP. XRP is an open source digital asset that gets traded in over 200 exchanges around the world. And the price is decided by people who are doing the trading. And it gets traded in local currency pair all over the world. So Ripple is not a participant in it. We, like you, are an observer in terms of markets going up and down. But what you're finding, at least in the market, is, say, for example, we had a $30 billion trading day a couple of weeks ago, right? So the liquidity is deepening, the market is deepening, and it's really the buyer and seller and there are millions of buyers and sellers who essentially decide the price. It's not Ripple. So I don't know what the price will be in the future or even in the next second, because neither me or the company is participating. What we are building, so in those terms, those open source technologies like the internet, and what we are building is routers for money. So in some way, we are like a Cisco, which essentially, like Cisco is for the internet, Ripple is for the movement of money. Right? So that was one. The second thing that you asked about, why Ripple or why not something else? I think technology part is the easy one to solve. I think there's so many brilliant people just in this room itself who can probably come up with a better technology, and technology will keep evolving. But where we make a difference is the ecosystem, right? So, I mean, a lot of people will have different telephones, but standardizing that telephone connectivity and say, can we build a switchboard in which more and more people can join? As hundreds of financial institutions and their customers become part of Ripple, that's the place where we make a big difference. And then another place which you will see in 2 years is interoperability. So for example, Ripple, in its open source, we build an open standard called as Interledger Protocol, and there could be other open standards as well. And the way we think about it will be traditional networks, like for example, a MasterCard network, a Visa network, a check network, or an ACH network in a country will be interoperable with the Ripple network. So we don't think of it as an isolated world, but we think about the technology and we are seeing, hey, 2 years later, what is the problem that we are going to have? We are going to have the problem of interoperability. And we have already solved for that so that the Ripple network is again not built in isolation like most of the networks are, but they're able to speak with each other, right? And that's where our mind is at, interoperability and building the ecosystem. And sorry, I missed the last question. Yeah, so the way to think about it would be, so for example, just in this region, just on remittances, and this is individual remittances, for example, Raja sending money to Navin is more than 100 billion US dollars. So just to start with one use case, individuals sending back money to their family is $100 billion market size. Then there will be SMEs, then there'll be corporates. I mean, so then you can just keep layering up on the top.
Sorry to interrupt. My question was more about how are you able to quantify that? How are you able to estimate the size of that market? How did you come up with that number?
So that number is available from the central bank figures. So if you look at the UAE central bank, different central banks issue, and they also give their numbers to World Bank. So this is publicly available data. So if you go to World Bank, you're able to download remittance by country, originating country, and the destination country. And it shows remittances and it shows exports and imports. And if you do the math, then you will come to that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. So where do you see Flare sitting in the XRP community? And would you say it's a contender to Ethereum and your answer to Ethereum?
So what I would say is, honestly, we are so, live in such a dynamic world that there are no static answers, right? So whatever I will tell you is only true when t is equal to 0 for people who are scientifically oriented. But at t is equal to 1, in next 5 seconds, it may change, right? So all this is in a very early stage of formation, right? It's amorphous, markets are moving. They're really brilliant people who are working on it, who are trading, who are creating new ideas. And at early stages, there are no static positions. I think what I would say is all these are early stage experiments. That's the way you should think about it. That's the way you should learn about it. And as they grow scale, they have to prove themselves to earn your respect, earn your business, make a difference in your life, with something that is not available today. And if they're able to do that, they will sustain. Otherwise, they will fade away. Right? I think I think I can answer only it in principle. And honestly, like, I don't know myself because of the same reason, because it's just so dynamic and so early stage of some of these things to come together. Right? And I'm not trying to evade your question, but I truly believe that that's the stage we are in.
One final question for Navin, most popular man here today.
Morning, Navin. So is Ripple API available to enterprises to plug into? That's one. I mean, I understand you're doing obviously a lot of the integration with financial institutions, with networks, get that. But if you are a global enterprise who needs to plug into the remittances piece, is that something that's possible? Number two, what's the coverage like today? So, for example, if I'm a company in UAE right now, can I, as a UAE entity, connect into Ripple to be able to do all the funky things you were talking about, or what parts of the world does that coverage exist today? And do you go beyond remittances? Like if you're talking about receivables, right, and payables with virtual IBANs and all, a lot of developments happening in that front with the incumbents, right, with the current financial institutions. Is that something that Ripple does as well? Just curious to know.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely. So the first answer is our APIs are standardized and they're available for enterprise to use as well, no problem at all. But the only thing that I would say is because we don't deal with the enterprise directly, we deal through the financial institution. So if it's a Ripple-enabled financial institution, 3 of us sit in the room, and if that's the best way for you to interact with your institution and then onward into the beneficiary, absolutely, right? So I think there needs to be a discussion because you are actually a customer of that financial institution, KYC, AML, or your store of value is that financial institution. And hence it's important, right? So from our point of view, that's the portion that we are scaling up, right? So the second question is number of other use cases that we are enabling. So our technology is very nimble, right? But we have to start somewhere. And hence we have started with remittances because that's the place most friction, You know the reasons, right? But for example, one of the things we have in our technology called as reverse request to pay, right? Where a receiver can request money from the sender, like what you talked about in terms of debiting the accounts. So in this case, you are able to manage receivables as well, right? Now we have introduced something called as line of credit. And this is for financial institutions who work with Ripple, who want to, say, for example, borrow in digital assets or in some other format, then to be able to use it as a lubricant and not have working capital trapped in their destination markets. So there are a number of things that we are doing, but for an enterprise that is at scale and is facing this friction, we are happy to come along with you, with your financial institution and solve this problem. Outside of financial institution, we know that this is the best way for us to scale up, and hence we directly don't work with the enterprise for now.
Citi on the list?
It's not right now, but there are a lot of other competent players are on the list. And I think the way I think about it would be if you are an enterprise, you don't almost care which intermediary that is, till the intermediary is able to earn your business, is able to make a significant difference to you. And I think if you have that openness, then I think, we are open to working with you.